Magic music on Golden Brown. Radio Borders.
Love that drum at the end. The first hit single on the charts reached number 11 for Pilot and Magic, and I'm delighted to say that the man that sang that song and wrote it as well is with me in the studio, David Paton. Morning, David. Welcome to Golden Brown.
Good morning, Hugh. It's nice to be here.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining me. I know you've had a late night last night playing and gigging up in Edinburgh, so it's really nice to see you, and thank you for taking the time to be with me. Now, let me just ask you about Magic, because it's such a cracking tune. Still sounds great. 37 years on.
I know. It's a song, like a lot of songs that I wrote in these days. I used to have a little tape recorder on top of my piano, and when any idea came into my head, I would just slap it down on the tape recorder, and I had that chorus, and it's only a 4-bar chorus. Technically it's a 4-bar chorus, and it was just an idea lying on the tape recorder. And one morning I had to get up really early, and my wife said to me, "I've never been awake to see a daybreak." And I thought, there's a line for a song that'll go with that little chorus that I've got on my tape machine. So this is how it came about.
Tremendous. And there is a lovely story about just last year, actually, when you met Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys.
Yes. That was a great privilege. I've been a big fan of Brian Wilson for a long, long time. Love his songwriting. And I was asked by the band, the Brian Wilson band, to go through to Glasgow and meet Brian, which I did. I was shown into his dressing room, and I was introduced as, this is the guy that wrote Magic. And he said to me, "You wrote that song? That's a fantastic song. I love that song." And we chatted a little bit, and then I said, "Can I have my photograph taken with you?" He said, "Yeah, sure, sit down." So I sat down beside him, and he just stared at me. He was looking at me, and he went, "Never believe it's not so." And I thought, that's a great line. So it's on the front of my latest album, "Never Believe It's Not So."
You don't get a much higher compliment than from Brian Wilson.
It's fantastic to, somebody that you've admired all your life to throw you a compliment. I mean, that's me, head in the clouds. Brilliant.
But one of the things about Magic and many of the other Pilot songs is they are almost timeless. They don't seem to have dated. They still sound as good in 2012 as they did way back in the mid-70s.
Well, I can't understand why that is. I mean, none of the songs are contrived in any way. It's like a lot of my songs just come to me in a flash. It's like, that old slapstick thing where there's a bucket or a pail on top of the door and it's full of water, and you open the door and splash, you're covered with it. This is what happens with me when I write a song. It seems to come all at once.
What do you think makes a good pop song? What makes a good, memorable pop song? I mean, something like Magic and January that we'll play shortly. I mean, people still obviously sing them and play them on the radio all the time. So that must make them good pop songs.
Yeah, it's always melody for me. It doesn't matter if it's a border song where it's just a single voice. It's always the melody that catches you. Also, with pop songs, a good introduction. And interestingly, with Magic, we had recorded the song where I just started it with piano and voice. And we realised this isn't dynamic enough. We have to go back in the studio again and put on a nice dynamic intro. And that's what happened there, a catchy intro.
It is like a hugely and that actually hooks people in, I suppose, doesn't it?
It does. It draws them in, and you have to have that dynamic at the front of the song to grab people's attention, I suppose.
I'm going to take you back to 1975, because actually one of the things that many bands did then, because local radio, independent local radio, was just in its youth, quite often the bands would make jingles for radio stations, wouldn't they? And I know, you probably haven't heard this in years actually, but I'm going to play you something that you haven't heard probably since the mid-1970s, and it's a jingle you did for our sister station through in Glasgow, okay. And it sounds like this.
Radio Clyde is magic.
love the way you rhymed. So, with radio.
It sings well, too.
You must have done a few of those, actually, for radio stations.
I spent a day in the studio doing one for each county. Oh, yes, a memorable time, and plenty of glasses of water at my hand then.
So let's go right the way back, because actually before Pilot, you were one of the original Bay City Rollers.
Oh, good. You've reminded me. My apprenticeship years. I always call it my apprenticeship years. There was many guys in Edinburgh, musicians in Edinburgh, who had a little bash playing in the Bay City Rollers, and I spent about a year with them. I must say it was a very enjoyable time. Paton, who's no relation of mine, the manager had us gigging 6 nights a week, and if we had a night off, we'd go to the cinema or we'd go for a meal together. And I think the idea was to keep us away from girls, not have any girlfriends involved, so that it made us more desirable to the fan base. And there was a huge fan base for the Bay City Rollers even before they had any chart success. We went holidays together. We used to drive to France or Spain, horse riding. We did a lot together. It was like a boys' club. It was really, really good fun.
So why did you leave then?
And they were about to sign with Bell Records, and I didn't think... I thought to myself, I'd rather do without success than be a successful Bay City Roller. That was just me, you know. I wanted to achieve things musically, and I don't think the Bay City Rollers were taken that seriously. And I was becoming very serious about my music. I was beginning to write, and I thought, I'll take a chance, and if I can have success with myself, fine, you know. And I was lucky; it worked out.
And Pilot, actually, I didn't know till fairly recently. The name came from 3 of your surnames, didn't
That's
it?
right.
I just thought it was, you thought Pilot was a good name. But actually, you did take it from PLT.
We did. The original members of Pilot were just a 3-piece, and we recorded the first album as a 3-piece with me playing bass and guitar. And at the time we were looking for a name, and somebody came up with that bright idea, the PLT, Paton, Lyle, Tosh, and somebody came up with, I think it was one of the manager's girlfriends came up with the name, and we just thought, wow, that's one of these names that just, why didn't we think of that?
Now, you got a gold disc for Magic, but the bigger success was to come in the summer of '75 with January. Tell us about January.
January was on the back of Magic. Magic was released in the October, and they were saying, come on, you need a follow-up. And I think they put out Just a Smile, maybe after January. It was after January. So after October, I was in the studio writing, and again, my wife is attributed to this one because she was reading a book, and the female lead in the book, her name was January, and she just said to me one evening, January's a nice name for a girl, don't you think? And I thought about it, and it just stayed in my head, and I found myself singing a melody for January. So although the chorus sounds like it's about a month, it was actually about a female in a book. And also the verse is totally unrelated to the chorus. The verse is more talking about the success of Magic and how, it's opened up the world for me. So that's what I'm singing about in the verse.
January, sick and tired, you've been hanging on me. You make me sad with your eyes. You're telling me lies. Don't go, January. Don't be cold, don't be angry to me.
Pilot did Top of the Pops many times, and we met many of our favourite artists at that time, and one of them was Queen. And EMI kind of paired us with Queen because we were the new signings, and they took us for meals together, and we got quite friendly with them all. And I remember after a particular Top of the Pops, we were in the Top of the Pops bar, and I went over to talk to Freddie, and Freddie said to me, why have you come over to talk to me? And I said, well, why not? He said, well, when I have a number one, I'll talk to no one.
Call me round, call me round. Don't be afraid. Why don't you call me round, call me round. Don't be afraid. Just call me round.
Do you think that there was an era for Pilot then, and for that kind of music before we went into, for instance, the punk era, which came around in the sort of 77?
Yeah, I think that had a lot to do with our demise, and musical tastes changed. But also, I think our heads were going out of Pilot as well. We were getting into other things. We started doing session work, and myself and Ian Bairnson did an album with Kate Bush. We did a couple of albums with Kate Bush. And
did you play on Wuthering Heights then?
I did, yeah. It's
amazing, isn't it?
I did the kick inside.
That's interesting, because actually you obviously wrote January, which was a number one, and you also appeared in another number one for Kate Bush. Not many artists can say that, and songwriters.
And there's Alan Parsons had Eye in the Sky. That was number one in the States. That was a big hit. Oh, interestingly, January was number one for 13 weeks in Australia.
In Australia?
That must have been a bit boring for a lot of people. They would watch the same video week in, week out.
Did you do a lot of world touring then?
We didn't at all. We did 2 UK tours, and that's all we did.
So you never really cracked the States then?
Not as a touring band, no. Although Magic was more successful in the States than it was over here. It was top 5 in the States. It was number 11 over here, I believe. I might be wrong.
No, you were number 5, absolutely right. But so did you go to America and promote anything?
No, we didn't.
No,
we didn't. No, we had massive management problems, and again, part of the apprenticeship. I think everybody goes through that kind of thing. And in a way, I think I was quite glad when it came to an end and I could get away from that terrible situation we were involved in. Although, as I said, I look back on it now and I only want to remember the good times. And there was a lot of good times.
Yeah, tremendous. Well, the final top 40 hit for Pilot, it was actually a reissue because it was the first ever single, which flopped first time around, but on the back of the hit singles, obviously EMI reissued it, and it got to the high position of 31 in the charts. And are you going to do a live version for us now on Golden Brown on Radio Borders of Just a Smile? Mr. David Paton.
I'm going to attempt it.
Just a smile, just a lonely smile, lets me know where I belong. Don't you know you're turning me on, turn me on. Finding out what it's all about, reaching up to the sky. Don't you know you're getting me high, I'm too high. Time I could easily make you mine anytime. If you're ever in need of love and care, I'll be there. There's something we can share anytime. Just a smile, just a lonely smile, lets me know where I belong. Don't you know you're turning me on, turn me on. Finding out what it's all about, reaching up to the sky. Don't you know you're getting me high, I'm too high. Likes to have someone else to get by. There's nobody else but you and I. Anytime you'd like to get next to me, anytime, nobody can deny, we'll get by. Just a smile, just a lonely smile, lets me know where I belong. Don't you know you're turning me on, turn me on. Finding out what it's all about, reaching up to the sky. Don't you know you're getting me high, I'm too high.
very much.
Not bad for a Sunday morning at this when you've been gigging till 3 in the morning.
Yes, the throat's okay. It's fine. I've lowered the key.
You can do that. It's your song. You can
my
do that.
song. Artistic
Do you
license.
know, we've chatted quite a while about Pilot. Sadly, Billy Lyle died in 1989. But the other three lads obviously are. Do you still see them and play with them, or is there any chance, in other words, of a Pilot reunion? Do you think?
Not as the original Pilot. I have been to Japan and Australia and did a couple of gigs with myself, David Paton from Pilot. I don't think there's enough. It's continuity. Both the other guys live in Spain. I think I mentioned to you earlier that I lived in Spain myself for a while, and we did see each other a lot when we all lived in Spain. But I'm back here now, and I'll see Stuart Tosh, the drummer, occasionally when he comes over to visit family in Edinburgh, but I haven't seen Ian Bairnson since I left Spain, which is 7 years ago.
Ooh, can't you see it? This is not my riding. I only ask if this was a town of planet. There were many archives. We had no media, only our surviving. Yeah, we had no media. Whoa, in the town of planet.
That's Elton John and Town of Plenty from the album Red Strikes Back, and that got to number 74 as a single in the UK charts, and the bass player on that album and indeed on 4 other Elton John albums was David Paton. Hey, it was the man himself. Do you look back on those times with Elton John, with happiness and pleasure?
Happiness. Great man to work for. No pressure on me. I was just the bass player, and that's the way I liked it. And Elton was fantastic to work for. For instance, if ever he was interested in a book of some sort, he would go away and order 12 copies for the band, and he'd sign them all and appear at your hotel room door, knock on the door with a pile of books up to his chin and hand you one and say, "That's for you." And he'd go on to the next member, and it was just a fantastic guy to work with.
And were there any tantrums and tiaras?
Occasionally, but it was understandable. I remember him once actually walking off the stage in the middle of Rocket Man when we were playing somewhere in the States, and he left us to play this tune round and round for about 20 minutes. Apparently what happened was he had gone into the car park and jumped into his limo and said to the limo driver, "Take me back to the hotel." And the limo driver couldn't get out of the car park because it was full of buses. So he had to slam the door and walk back on stage. You know how Elton walks like this? When it was quite amusing for us, but at the time he was very upset. However, he did come out of it. You can understand he's under a lot of pressure, and, he was responsible for 100 and odd people on the tour, and it's a lot of responsibility to have on your shoulders. And also, he never got any peace. If you saw his tantrums and tiaras, you could see him playing a game of tennis and there's somebody hanging out a window shouting, "Elton, Elton," no peace at all. So you could understand why he would have a little tantrum over something like that.
Ah, there you go. Good story, that. Recent years then for David Paton. Obviously, you're still gigging, you're still playing away, and you're still releasing material, because tell us about the album Under the Sun then.
Under the Sun came about. I wrote that song in particular, the title track, after I had a little health scare and I had to spend a bit of time in hospital. And the song, although it's not a great subject to sing about, it has it's a happy song, and it's just about having to be in the hospital and looking out the window with their nose pressed against the pane, watching life going on outside, the sun shining, there's people lying about in the grass, and it's wanting to do all these things that have been taken away from you because of your health. Emphasises, health is a very important thing to have in your life.
Definitely. Without health, you can't really do anything.
That's
can
right. That's right. So that's how the song came about.
I have to say, and I'm not saying this because you're sitting in front of me, you are looking incredibly well for a man of senior years.
Yes, I'm in my 60s now. I know. I don't know what I'm doing right. It must be a lot of wine. Maybe I'm pickled.
Interesting enough, EMI and RPM have been reissuing all the Pilot stuff, and the albums are coming back out again. And is it true that at one point you told people not to buy the re-recordings of your material?
Well, there were various cover versions of Pilot songs, Magic, sung by somebody else and somebody else. And I just happened to mention on YouTube or something that, always buy the original. EMI were Pilot's record label, and all the best recordings are on EMI. And to listen to an inferior copy of Magic doesn't do the song justice. Produced by Alan Parsons, fantastic. You're hearing it at its best.
Yeah, I hate that line, which used to come up a lot on CDs. Some or all of these tracks may have been re-recorded by some or all of the original. In other words, the drummer's on there or the backing vocalist.
Well, I'm saying that, but on my new album, Under the Sun, I've re-recorded Magic.
Yeah, but it sounds to me on that recording like you've used a lot of the backing tracks, or is it just you've tried to recreate them?
Not at all. I recorded that originally for the BBC, who had a charity day. I don't know if you remember, it was in the 80s, late 80s. They asked me to re-record the song. They didn't want to use the original because there's a string section on there and everybody would have to be paid. All the strings section would have to be paid.
Typical BBC.
So they asked me to re-record it, and I got a drummer I was using at the time to put down the drum track. He was brilliant at mimicking exactly what was on the record. And it sat in my archives for a long, long time, and I suddenly realised, there's people using Magic. There's the Selena Gomez version, which has been a huge hit in America, and Disney have a big tie-in with that and the film and all the rest of it. And I thought, well, maybe it's time that I started to use my own material for myself, and I promised myself I would never put out an inferior version of Magic. And to me, that's been with me for 15 years, that particular version. I've tarted it up. As technology has evolved, I've managed to improve my studio, the quality in my studio, and what you're hearing there is pretty close to the original, apart from it being a tone down.
Well, people,
which
of
is
course,
understandable.
Absolutely. People, of course, can hear that version if you go to davidpatonsongs.com and you buy the album Under the Sun. And we're going to finish with the title song. David, it's been a real pleasure. I could talk to you for so much longer. Thank you for playing live for us on Golden Brown and for taking the time to be with us here on Radio Borders. And we'll finish with the title track from Under the Sun. Enjoy your daughter's birthday party this afternoon.
Thanks very much.
Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
I went to the doctor. He said, you got a problem.